Hey there, we're the Westlaw Pirates and welcome to the show. We're here to share our thoughts on Northwestern athletics and college sports, with thoughts and analysis from the visceral to the statistical. We run our tailgate with the red pirate flag flying high above, as we give no quarter, especially the fourth. I'm Sam Walter.
I'm John Lacombe.
And I'm Eric Skoskowspo.
Well, we are doing our summer previews. We started the season of our summer previews with Pac-12 teams, USC, Oregon, UCLA, the three former Pac-12 teams we don't play. So why not do another Pac-12 team, or at least the semblance of a Pac-12 team, with Michigan State bringing over Jonathan Smith from Oregon State. Is Michigan State kind of a Pac-12 adjacent? Maybe.
I mean, the way that the WAC was adjacent to the Pac-12, maybe, yeah.
I mean, they would finish last in the Pac-12, much like they are going to finish last in the Big Ten. So,
yeah.
So yeah, I mean, Michigan State was real bad last year, and the Mel Tucker era did not end well, as we know. But what do we make of Sparty this year, John?
I mean, this is what bottoming out looks like. This right here is what it looks like. And it's funny, this is our first Big Ten team that we're all familiar with coming in, right? So, I mean, we've talked about 3 Pac-12 teams incoming that we've previewed so far that we had to familiarize ourselves with. But I think we can all agree that you think like those are teams we're not familiar with. A lot of ways, it doesn't feel like we're familiar with this Michigan State football team. Because we talked about last year that over the history of this pod, one of the most dramatic shifts that has happened is that there were just this forever stretch where you could just pencil in Michigan State being good on defense. And that's just long gone. And it's just this dramatic shift in everything that we've come to know and appreciate while we've been doing this pod. And let me tell you, like, that trend is just more of the same this coming year, and it was certainly more of the same last year. So that once vaunted Michigan State defense that we used to talk about year after year was 11th in the Big Ten in scoring defense last year, 13th in the Big Ten in total defense last year. It sent 0 players to the NFL draft, and then it had a ton of guys transfer out. Sparty's just a mess on this side of the ball. And now Michigan State's going to try to turn the page from the Mel Tucker era, and they're going to try to dig out of this hole. But I am telling you, I do not like the tea leaves here. So for starters, I mean, Scuzz will talk plenty more about like Jonathan Smith, but Jonathan Smith is an offensive-minded coach. And I am very worried about who he selected as his defensive coordinator, who is Joe Rossi from Minnesota. This feels like a classic offensive head coach who doesn't pay close attention to the other side of the ball kind of defensive coordinator hire. Because as we have hammered home over the past couple of years, Minnesota's defensive numbers have been a total mirage, okay? Minnesota didn't even have a particularly good defense. Opposing teams just never have touched the ball against them because of the strength of the Minnesota ground game. But whatever, Michigan State thinks that Rossi is going to be their savior, and they've brought him in to kickstart a defense that is absolutely in the basement right now. And then you have to consider what Michigan State is working with. So you look at guys like Cal Halladay, who's the engine of this entire defense at linebacker. He has 300-plus tackles in his career. Or you look at a guy like cornerback Angelo Gross, who's entering his 5th year with the Spartans. If these guys could be pros by now, they would be pros by now. These guys don't have a major incentive to stick around here, okay? Michigan State put one defensive guy in an NFL camp last year, and that was a guy who had transferred into Michigan State a year earlier and then spent almost the entire 2023 season hurt. So, i.e., there wasn't anybody with a better ticket to the NFL than that last season. And we're talking about Michigan State's good players, because as a whole, this is a team that can't get to the quarterback, and it can't cover wide receivers. Washington erased this team last year. 713 total yards Washington put up against Sparty last year. And look, Michigan State has a ton of transfers coming in. Maybe some of them hit. But I really want to hammer home again here. Joe Rossi's entire defensive philosophy at Minnesota was basically have the Minnesota running game be awesome. And now he's paired with an offense that absolutely sucks. And I'm sure Scuzz is going to drill down on it. So good luck with that, is all I can say.
If you or a loved one is seriously injured by someone else's negligence, hire Kent Simpson of the Simpson Law Group. After over a decade prosecuting murder cases in Chicago, Simpson opened his own firm focused on wrongful death and personal injury cases. He specializes in car, truck, motorcycle, boat, and other transportation accidents, as well as construction accidents, medical negligence, slip and falls, product liability, and more. Millions recovered for clients, no fee unless he wins. The Simpson Law Group, compassion, empathy, and vigorous advocacy. Go to simpsonlawgroup.com or call 312-332-2107 for a free consultation. And go Cats.
John, do you want to know what Michigan State averaged running the ball last year?
Oh, dear God. What was it?
90 yards per game.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
Their worst mark dating back to 1947.
Good Lord.
Now, in the COVID year, they rushed for 91 yards per game. So we are splitting hairs a little bit, but still.
Yeah.
I mean, you talk about
good.
You talk about how you talk about watching that defense kind of like crater and fall apart over the course of our years podcasting, and the offense ain't far behind, right? I mean, this used to be a powerful running offense with big physical wide receivers. They could throw downfield. You think Kirk Cousins, forgetting the name of the QB that came after him that was there for a handful of years, but their culture and their identity has just kind of dripped and drabbed away. I feel like they don't recruit like they used to. That there were noises back when I think when Tressel was fired from Ohio State that D'Antonio used to benefit. Tressel would pass him guys that Ohio State wasn't going after, and I don't know how true that was, but you've just seen this once really proud, strong program that frankly had superseded Michigan in the pecking order in the Big Ten just completely come apart in slow motion.
So what do you make of the Spartans' offense this year?
I mean, it's going to be rough.
What do we know?
It's going to be rough. I don't know how else to say it. So, last year there were a lot of questions with Peyton Thorne leaving. He transferred. And so my preview in a nutshell last year was that Michigan State did not pull in players from the portal on offense. They did not bring in many offensive recruits. So the offense really looks like it's trending backwards. Staying above 20 points per game may be a challenge, and it would be their worst output since 2018. That's what I thought was going to happen last year. That was an understatement. 16 points a game.
Good Lord.
The 90 rushing yards per game that I mentioned earlier. Their passing efficiency was bad. They gave up more sacks. Interceptions trended the wrong way. Touchdowns trended the wrong way. It just like a catastrophe. Now, in that vein, they can't get worse in 2024. Two of their top running backs each missed like 5 or 6 games with injury, but they had a bevy of talent returning on the offensive line last year. They've usually had a solid running back room. Like the fact that they couldn't put together anything on a running offense, and maybe with Mel Tucker getting fired after week 2, when they were 2-0, I might add, albeit against really really inferior talent. Like maybe the will and the want of this team just evaporated. And I guess I hope for their sakes that maybe that's true, and they have a bit more in the tank than we think there is this year. But man, it doesn't look great. So. In that vein, let's be positive. Hope springs eternal. Let's talk about your 2024 Oregon State Spartans offense. So in addition to head coach Jonathan Smith, who you mentioned earlier, he's a former coach and also a former quarterback of Oregon State. The new offensive coordinator was Oregon State's offensive coordinator. The new O-line coach is from Oregon State. The new quarterback is from Oregon State. The new center and the new tight end are, you guessed it, from Oregon State. So I'm going to talk more about the Beavers offense than I am Michigan State at this point. The Beavers were a well-balanced, good offense last year. They're really known for their prowess running the ball under Smith. And so he and his OC and his O-line coach are going to start working to rebuild that at Michigan State. The offensive line coach, I was with the Giants in the NFL for their two Super Bowls under I'm forgetting the name of their head coach, but yes, under Coughlin. And he's really good. He minted awesome talent at Oregon State for years. Presumably they can get back to that. Probably not this year, but that's something they have going for them. They do bring back their top running back from last year in Nate Carter. He had some really nice games early on in the year. This dude ran for 108 yards and at a 5.4 clip against Iowa on the road. But then he fell off. He got injured for a little bit, etc. But what they don't have this year is an offensive line. They lose 4 starters, 6 players with starting experience. If you count the right guard from Oregon State coming over to Michigan State to play center, this team is returning 2 starters on the O-line. Phil Steele's favorite stat, career starts on the offensive line, is a paltry 31. That is incredibly low. The talent and the pedigree of the 2 deep is not going to make anybody feel better. This is just like they're bottom of the barrel, like you said, John, is the apt term. They are starting from virtually nothing to rebuild. The pass catchers are similarly pretty thin and uninspiring. There's not a lot of experience there. Same thing with running back. Behind Carter is a UMass transfer and a couple of freshmen. The tight end they got from Oregon State was solid as a Beaver. Of his 29 catches last year, 8 went for touchdowns. So they got that going for him. But that's all to say. If there is going to be some excitement on this side of the ball, it'll be watching the quarterbacks. So Aiden Chiles played a bit behind DJ Uyunglele last year. He knows the scheme. He completed 70% of his passes in somewhat limited duty. He's a dual threat guy, so that could help the offensive line find their footing a little bit, reduce some of the sack rate. They gave up 25 sacks last year. They also have the latest North Dakota State phenom product in Tommy Schuster, who threw for 9,000 yards, literally 9,000 yards over the last 4 years in Grand Forks. So there's some excitement to watch in the quarterback room, but again, starting from scratch at O-line, pretty much from scratch at wide receiver, from scratch with scheme, coaching staff, etc. It is just going to be. I think Jonathan Smith can do a lot with this offense over the coming years. I think he can build them back. I think he will build them back. But man, this season's going to be rough sledding.
Have you ever thought about building a Westlaw Pirates-like community for your business? If so, we've got your solution. Teamworks Media, a brand marketing and content company, is here to help you tell your brand story better. Better yet, you can work directly with the founder, Jay Sharman, known on this podcast as Like the Posts. The same expertise he's brought to brands like ESPN, the Big Ten Conference, and Northwestern University are now available to you in an affordable way, directly with this Wildcat superfan. Contact Jay directly at 312-446-9435 or jay@teamworksmedia.com to learn how to elevate your brand story. Their schedule isn't going to do them any favors either. I mean, this is, wait till we get to the middle of this and it gets rough.
Yeah, so the start's not too bad.
Yeah, no, it's okay. They open up the year against Florida Atlantic, then they travel to Maryland, home for Prairie View A&M, then they're at Boston College.
Anything happen after that?
Well, can I note real quick, this is the first of the other Big Ten teams that we've looked at. None of them have had an FCS team on their schedule. So I guess, that's at least one nice thing here.
Well, I mean, you think about it, we've looked at Oregon, who plays Washington every year. I mean, or who's going to play Oregon State, right? They're keeping that non-conference thing going. You've got USC and UCLA plays Notre Dame every year. The Pac-12 teams don't typically play at FCS opponents.
They expressly didn't have them. I think for the most part in the last few years.
So it'll be interesting to see moving forward if that starts to change a little bit. If they,
I guess those non-conference games would have been in place for the most part before the transition to the Big Ten. I hadn't thought about that before. That's interesting.
Exactly. Yeah. All right, so September 28th, Ohio State comes a calling. Then the very next week, they get on a plane, fly out to Oregon to take on the Ducks. They get a week off after that to rest up before coming home to play Iowa, and then they travel to Michigan. They're home for Indiana. They got another bye week. Then they go to Champaign to take on Illinois, and then they finish off the season at home against Purdue and Rutgers.
I'm picturing Indiana rolling into East Lansing, and I'm thinking kind of like Joel and Ellie walking across country in The Last of Us and looking at like a smoldering rubble and being like, there was a football stadium here once. And look, like they get 3 of their last 4, Indiana, Illinois, Purdue, like those are their best chances for conference wins in the Big Ten on their schedule. But like, it must be said that like Rutgers to end the season, Rutgers is firmly above them in the Big Ten pecking order right now.
Rutgers beat them last year, and Rutgers is going to smoke this team this year.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally agree. And yeah, I mean, they're going to be a corpse after those 5 games in the middle. I mean, I also think Maryland is going to be better than them. And so you're saying a 3-5 start feels charitable. I don't know anything about Florida Atlantic, but they've got Boston College on the road. Like that game feels like a toss-up. So, I mean, if things break their way, they could start 3-5, and then I suppose you want to go Indiana, Illinois, and Purdue, but I mean, I think we shouldn't expend too much effort being charitable here when things are very likely to go in the exact opposite direction with this team. Like the floor 2.
2?
2-10 is absolutely on the table for this team. They aren't good at anything. Not one thing.
Yeah.
So I don't know anything about Florida Atlantic. I don't know anything about Prairie View A&M.
Purdue is similarly like situated. So I mean, you could like I'd probably say the floor is 3. It's pretty hard to go winless in the Big Ten.
3 sounds right.
But
I mean, 3 and 9, you could talk me into in a second.
Yeah, that and like I said their offense can't be worse than it was last year. They've got something at the QB position, which they really didn't have last year. That was a huge outage for them. So
and they've got an offensive mind at head coach too.
Yeah,
so Mel Tucker was the defensive guy,
so they can maybe make some noise. But the talent deficiency, and then this defense is probably going to get even worse.
Right. And again, like all props to what Smith got done at Oregon State, but he's an Oregon State guy, and he's very much now in the Midwest. There's any number of ways this could go sideways, and if it does, no one's going to be surprised. We say this, like I have no problem with Michigan State. Like, we had a lot of respect for Michigan State during the vast majority of the years of this pod. We have Harlan Barnett on our coaching staff now, who calls back to those glory days. No bad blood with Michigan State here. Like, we're cool with them, but it just is what it is. Like, they're in the basement right now.
Hey, speaking of Jonathan Smith having played at Oregon State, he was the quarterback in 2000 when Oregon State went to the Fiesta Bowl and smashed a undeserving Notre Dame team who went to said Fiesta Bowl based on, I think, a 9-3 record. And I say undeserving because they pipped Nebraska out of the BCS and left us to play Nebraska in the Fiesta Bowl.
Oh, jeez. It always comes back to the Alamo. Remember the Alamo. I try not to.
Indeed.
Yeah, that was rough. But yes, that's an interesting callback. But yeah, fortunes rising and falling in this conference for sure. Michigan State is this influx. I mean, it's funny because they don't really get. I mean, they have that trip to Oregon, which that sucks for you. But aside from that, I mean, this feels like a classically Big Ten schedule for them in a lot of ways, and that still is not going to do them any favors. I just think they're, like a better Michigan State team, a mid-grade Michigan State team, there's a lot of meat on the bone on this schedule, but not for this team. I just don't see it making a difference.
I mean, interestingly, they play the entire East, or the entire old East, save Penn State. So if basically you're trading Penn State for Oregon, it's a pretty standard Big Ten schedule. So,
but I mean, they played Washington last year, so.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Okay. So it's actually, I guess it is technically a little bit easier than last year because you're trading. So then you're trading a Penn State for Illinois or Purdue.
As I said again, Washington put up 714 yards in that game, and at Oregon.
Not only did Washington put up 714, but Michigan State only put up 260 in that game.
Right. Yeah. And let's put it this way. Both of those numbers in play on the road against Oregon.
Anything else to mention about Sparty before we get out of here?
Another team I wish we had on the schedule this year.
Yeah.
Yes, very much so.
Well, on that note, we'll go ahead and leave it there for tonight. Head to our website, westlawpirates.com, where you can leave comments and questions. Find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube at Westlaw Pirates. And you can always email the show, westlawpirates@gmail.com. Tune in next time as we give our visceral and statistical views on Northwestern athletics. And look for us in the west side of Ryan Field flying the red pirate flag, because we give no quarter, especially the fourth. For John Lacombe and Eric Scasboy, I'm Sam Walter. Thanks so much for listening. We'll see you next time.